Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to turn cameras on and unmute. If not, that's okay too. We are happy to have you. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Hi, Tiffany. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. I know there might be some people that still join us, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know it's very precious. As we get started, go ahead and feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from, a little bit about your role in education. And while you're doing that, Casey and I will also introduce ourselves. My name is Mandy Morris, and I am the elementary math and STEAM specialist with Encompassing Education. And a little bit about my background in education. I started as a public school teacher for primary grades in the Bloomington, Indiana area. And I then was able to be an instructional coach with STEM and project-based learning for that district. And currently I serve as the technology specialist for Franklin College in their education department. And I've joined Encompassing Education in the spring to give professional development like this in elementary math and STEAM, along with the rest of the wonderful team at Encompassing Education. And Casey is also joining us today, so I will let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am the executive assistant with Encompassing Ed, and I'll be monitoring today's session. So I'll be monitoring the chat, answering any questions you may have. I will also be sending you a recording as well as any resources that Mandy shares today to you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Casey. And I see some of our participants are starting to introduce themselves in the chat. All right. As we get started, I want to say thank you to the following educational service centers. They are the reason that you are able to attend this free professional development and get all the wonderful resources and recording that go along with it. Thank you so much for that opportunity, not only for us to be able to provide this, but for you as educators and administrators to be able to have this wonderful access just by partnering with your local educational service centers. So thank you to those partners there. Before we get started, just welcome. We're so glad to have you. We did start on time and we plan to end on time. Your time is valuable and we recognize that. If you're joining us live, stay engaged. Feel free to turn your video on, unmute, participate, whatever you're comfortable with. Use those Zoom features, put chat messages in the chat box, raise your hands. Casey and I are going to do our best to make sure we don't miss anything you have, and feel free to stop me along the way with questions or comments or ideas that you have. We can make this as interactive as you want it to be. And just a reminder, I know Casey already mentioned it, but the session is being recorded for future use. So today, our learning target for you as participants, we are going to view elementary STEAM through the lens of integrated teaching practices. And what that means is we are going to think about teaching practices that really promote authentic and innovative learning across all content areas. This is not a type of session or philosophy where we look at STEAM as just a siloed, standalone activity or special class. We are really focusing on it through the lens of just what is good teaching and learning, and what does that look like when we are doing these STEAM teaching practices. So to start off with, if you're willing to participate, you are welcome to unmute yourself and answer live or put your answer in the chat. Just first, let's talk about what does it mean to you to be an innovative learner? What does an innovative learner do or look like or think like? What kind of ideas come to mind when we think of innovative learners?
I think an innovative learner is kind of a self-motivated learner that takes the initiative and looks up and goes beyond just finding the basic facts.
I love that, Bill. Thanks for sharing.
In the chat, somebody responded, curious, asks questions, taking risks, trying new things. Innovative learners think outside of the box and they are problem solvers.
These all sound like great things. And like, how much do we want our students, our kids, to be these types of learners, right? And so hopefully what you'll start to see, even though we're only going to just skim the surface of it today in this session, but being able to integrate these STEAM teaching practices into your everyday classroom, no matter the content, we are really going to be able to foster that innovation in our learners. So I love that you already have such a great understanding and a knowledge of what an innovative learner looks like. So the other side of that is not only what makes an innovative learner, but what does it mean then to be an effective teacher? So I know from your guys' introductions, we definitely have some teachers here. We also have mental health professionals, SEL coordinators. We have some district coaches here as well, and other people watching the recordings in different roles. But so I'm just curious to you guys, what does it mean to be an effective teacher, either in your role or what you observe in your buildings and in your districts? What do you hope to see effective teaching look like?
For me, an effective teacher, my favorite line is to be a facilitator and not just a conveyor of knowledge. So the teacher that facilitates and gets the concept across and facilitates learning is the effective teacher.
I love that. Looks like we have some good comments in the chat here too. You want to share those out, Casey?
Sorry, I was talking, but I didn't unmute myself. We mentioned foster curiosity, student interest first, and Diane mentioned to present lots of opportunities for students to encounter problems and work through the problem to seek new solutions.
I love that. Well, you guys are in luck because what you're describing as effective teachers is exactly what integrating STEAM teaching practices look like. So that being said, I was thinking about framing today's session through the idea of what is deemed effective teaching. And so as many of you know, in the state of Indiana, we use the RISE evaluation model, or your district has adopted something very similar to this model to evaluate the effectiveness of educators and teachers. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to see the connection between this evaluation model of what's deemed effective teaching. And I'm going to show you how integrating these STEAM teaching practices in your everyday instruction is going to check so many of the boxes of being an effective teacher. So this is extremely useful for you if you're a teacher, or even if you're an administrator mentoring teachers and evaluating teachers and what you want to see in your districts and your buildings. So thinking about the RISE model, they have 3 different domains in that evaluation model, and they are purposeful planning, effective instruction, and teacher leadership. Most of what we're going to focus on today is going to fall under the domains of purposeful planning and effective instruction. And so within effective instruction, there are 9 different competencies of what makes up effective instruction. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go through and share a little bit, just kind of quick overviews of some different STEM teaching practices and how they relate to these 9 competencies of effective instruction. So like if you're doing this STEAM teaching practice in your classroom, you are going to be effectively, like you're going to be meeting these competencies of effective instruction. And so that's kind of how we're going to move forward today. And so the STEAM instructional strategies, we're going to focus on 12 different ones today. And again, that's a lot. So these are just going to be real quick overviews, but just know this is just a taste of what it could be. And so if you find certain things really speak to you, or maybe you're already doing them, or you can see this fitting really well in your district, then the opportunity comes to be able to learn more about this and how to really implement it and create that effective growth of teachers and the innovative learners that we want to see in our schools and our districts. So for the STEAM instructional practices that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the 5E instructional model, scientific investigations, argumentation, claim, evidence, reasoning, engineering solutions, technology integration, some questioning strategies, how to address student misconceptions, reading and writing in STEAM, cooperative learning, and project-based learning. And so feel free to write any questions in the chat, raise your hand, unmute, stop me as we go. Otherwise, we're going to jump right in now with the first one, which is the 5E instructional model. So what this is this is a really great way to do planning for inquiry-based learning. And so when we talk about the 5E model and how to integrate this into a practice for STEM or STEAM, this is just learning how to design lessons that pique student interest while also developing the conceptual understanding through hands-on exploration. And so you can see then I've shown some connections to that RISE evaluation model of which domains this connects to. So purposeful planning and effective instruction. And within effective instruction, we have several connections, and these are pulled right from the rubric. This is how teachers are evaluated. This is how schools and districts are evaluated with effective teaching. And just this one simple planning tool of using the 5E instructional model to plan intentional teaching and learning for your students can meet so many different domains and so many different connections of effective instruction. And then next with the scientific investigations, this is examining why doing science is essential to learning science. So science isn't going to be just something that you learn from a textbook necessarily, at least not effectively. And so learning how to refine existing classroom materials and resources so that higher degrees of inquiry can be achieved. And again, you'll see these connections of how this is going to help students be engaged in their academic content. It's going to help them develop higher level of understanding and maximize that instructional time and create the culture of respect and collaboration that we want to see in our schools. And I know we have someone on here that introduced themselves as being like an SEL coordinator and working with that in schools. And I love so much the connection that we have between STEAM, and we can talk more about that too, because we are going to talk about collaborative learning as well. And there's just so many benefits to the whole child when we integrate STEAM teaching practices. When we talk about argumentation, this is a way to not only learn, but then implement protocols into our classrooms that help students to positively and productively develop, analyze, critique, and defend arguments. And I'm sure you can see connections to the real world here, why this is so important for our students to be able to develop these skills. We see a lot of arguing happening in our world, but there is such thing as productive arguments and argumentation, and being able to think critically and develop claims and being able to support them and analyze them and being able to defend them, and also to see what's valid and not valid. And so again, you can see those connections to the effective instruction just by doing some of these simple things in your classroom. And then a great connection with that is the claim evidence reasoning. So this is when we're taking a claim, we're making a claim, but then we also have to support it with evidence. And then our reasoning is what connects our evidence to our claim. So this is definitely a way that we can set high expectations for academic success, and a way that we can develop that higher level of understanding and like through rigorous instruction and work for our students. And it's helping them have an understanding and implementation of that claim evidence reasoning framework, and being able to develop tools and practices that we can implement into our classrooms effectively as teachers. So when we talk engineering solutions, this is, I think, what we think of most of the time. When we think about STEM or STEAM, we think of, building spaghetti and marshmallow towers and things like that. And those are a great start, and there's nothing wrong with them. But when we talk about true engineering solutions, it makes it so much more impactful and meaningful, because we're exploring the role of the engineering design process to address real world problems. So not only does it involve possibly building something, but at the heart of it is we have scenarios where our students are authentically trying to find solutions to real problems. And it just makes it so much more meaningful for our students. And the way that you guys described innovative learners at the beginning of this session is exactly this. What you'll see when you learn how to implement the engineering design process into your classroom, you're going to see innovative learning happen. You're going to see your students being curious and asking questions and solving problems. And so this is something that is not only extremely impactful to effective teaching and innovative learning, it makes teaching just really, really fun. And I think sometimes we as teachers, we need more of that. And so engineering solutions is a great one to learn how to integrate into your classroom, especially at the elementary level when they do already have that natural curiosity. When we talk about questioning strategies, this is where we can develop as teachers. I like to think of this as not only being great for effective instruction, but really I find this as a good fit in purposeful planning, because it's thinking about different taxonomies and thinking about learning targets and deciding what level of questioning do we need to explicitly plan for in our instruction to make sure that we are engaging students in the academic content and that we're checking for understanding. And this ties right into some formative assessments and being able to modify our instruction based on what we're finding from these questioning strategies. And so not only are we going to plan this in our instruction and model it for our students, but then we're also going to facilitate and help them learn how to think critically for themselves and ask their own questions when it becomes developmentally appropriate for them to do so. And part of STEAM is definitely integrating technology. And when it comes to integrating technology, there are so many different ways that that we can do this. It can be anything from just utilizing it in certain lessons. It can also be taking the approach of blended learning and digital learning and what that looks like. There are different models of how that can look like, that can look like in your classroom. But it's by no means just giving a student a device. True integration of technology is really going to transform and enhance learning. And so when we talk about integrating technology, that can happen across all content areas. And the great thing about thinking about this through the elementary lens is we teach all content areas anyways. And so being able to integrate technology is just a way that we can help embed those various tools and strategies that are really going to increase student engagement and learning. Another one that we can specifically talk about is addressing misconceptions. And this ties, again, right into good instruction and being able to modify instruction as needed. Because when we ask good questions and we think about formative assessments and we can see where our students are having some of these misconceptions, we then as teachers and educators know how to modify our instruction to meet the needs of our students. So how can we intentionally plan for instruction that uses those probing questions to identify and understand students' misconceptions? And then also helping them with that metacognition of being able to identify their own misunderstandings. Because an innovative learner is also eventually hopefully going to be like an independent learner too. And that goes into, when you were talking about effective teaching, I think Bill mentioned being able to just be the facilitator of learning and not having your students always rely on you for all of the information. And so being able to foster that in your students and having them know and being able to identify their own misunderstandings is huge. So I love being able to integrate reading into STEAM. And I think this is especially important for elementary teachers because we know how important the foundational reading skills are. And that is a big deal for what we do. And so being able to integrate reading into things that are already engaging and exciting and interesting for students, such as STEAM, really helps us to be able to engage our students in that academic content of reading outside of like an intense reading block. Not only that, is it gives purpose to what the students are learning. So if students are learning specific reading skills or literacy practices, being able to apply them in the real world with STEAM makes it even more meaningful and authentic for them, which we know improves student engagement. And we also know improves just their understanding to be able to apply what they've learned and the strategies they've learned. And being able to how to use primary and secondary text resources and all the things that can be involved with reading and why it's important, even in things such as STEAM. And in correlation to that, writing in STEAM happens all the time. And it is such an exciting thing when you have students wanting to write something because it's connected to STEAM. I don't know how many times you've tried to get your students to write, and even just finding time in your day of like, when do we do this? Being able to integrate things with STEAM is a way that you can be really effective in maximizing your instructional time, which is a component of effective instruction.
In the chat, Diane mentioned that this makes her think of The Science of Reading and a book called The Knowledge Gap.
Yes, absolutely. And I know with Encompassing Education, April Conley is our like ELA guru, and she loves everything science of reading. And I know our state is making a big push to that, which is excellent. And so yes, Diane, that's a great connection. The Science of Reading is really talking about, those authentic reading experiences, and being able to integrate it into things like STEAM is only going to enhance the work you're doing with that kind of instruction too. That's a great connection. And then I told you we would talk about cooperative learning. And so STEAM is one of my favorite ways to practice and model cooperative learning in the classroom. So when we talk about cooperative learning and when we have training sessions and professional development on this specifically, we're going to be able to examine the current implementation of cooperative learning in your classroom. And when we look at it through the lens of STEAM, we can also look at it through increasing students' future success in those post-secondary careers. So this is when things come into play like workforce development. And if you're not aware, there are workforce development standards, even for our elementary students. Granted, they might not look like, job ready skills right now, but they are things such as collaboration and communication, and being able to work effectively and solve problems with other people. And so when we are doing STEAM instructional practice in our classrooms, we are giving our students so many opportunities to collaborate with one another and to collaborate with one another in very meaningful ways. We talked about things like argumentation and questioning and engineering solutions, all things that are pretty challenging topics and things to do, but all of those are also going to involve cooperative learning as well. And so that's why I love the idea of having some SEL connections with STEAM through cooperative learning, because sometimes it can be really hard to learn how to work with other people and how to talk to other people, especially when you have so many different ideas and you're wanting to do things certain ways, but you have to do it with other people. So this is just a very natural way to give your students those opportunities in the classroom to make that happen. And the last one we're going to talk about today is really the big umbrella. This is when we get to project-based learning, it is also sometimes kind of a standalone thing on its own, not necessarily connected to STEAM always. But I have found in my past experience that it's a very natural, strong connection. And in the state of Indiana, when they talk about things like inquiry-based learning and STEM and project-based learning, they group it together because they see the connections too. So when we talk about project-based learning, what we're talking about here is just the student, classroom, and teacher characteristics that are in place for effective implementation of this. And so what does teaching look like when we're doing project-based learning? This is not your traditional teaching of standing in front of the class and just giving them all the information they need. That's not what project-based learning is. There's a place for that within it, but overall, this is where your students are going to be able to put all of these pieces together for their learning. You're going to have driving questions that promote the learning of your students. They're going to want to find an answer to this question, but along the way, the really cool thing is they're going to realize they have things that they need to learn how to do before they can answer the question. And then that's when you come in and you help them with that new learning. And guess what? That new learning is connected to your academic standards. And so you are teaching what you're responsible for teaching, but in a really fun and engaging and meaningful way that is authentic for your students. And so I love being able to teach this way. And I love being able to help teachers plan this way, because this is one of the things, if you've been looking at the connections between the domains and the effective instruction connections to that RISE evaluation and that model of effective teaching, this one checks all of the boxes. Like if you are able to effectively implement project-based learning into your classroom, you are a top-notch effective teacher. And I guarantee that your learners in your classroom are very innovative. And it just makes it super, super fun to teach in this way. So I know that was a lot of information. There was a lot at once, but also just know these are quick little overviews of some different instructional teaching practices related to STEAM that we can integrate into our classrooms, no matter what content we're teaching, and no matter which elementary grade we're teaching. And it can happen a little bit every day in little ways. So I know I did a lot of talking. As you're thinking about some of those, the 12 different instructional practices of STEAM that we did go over, what questions do you have? Or what do you think this could look like? Or what takeaways maybe do you have from some of these? And again, feel free to unmute yourself and share, type it in the chat. Or do you have
Mandy,
questions? Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Mandy, I'm curious about the support that is needed for teachers to be able to do the different models.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because we are in a place where if you're already in the classroom teaching, this is probably not something you learned how to do in your preparation to become a classroom teacher. So this is some of the things are things where you might think, oh, I've been doing this before, but some of them aren't. And so that you do need support to know how to do this effectively. And that's what this professional development is for. Again, this is just the start of it. So this is just the first step. So if these are things that you want to be able to implement more effectively in your classroom, the support is there for you. It's like, this is what I do. It's my role here at Encompassing Education. We also have other consultants that can support for different roles and different purposes too. And so there is opportunity, and I can talk about it a little bit more of how I can help support that more with Encompassing Education and your goals and reaching what is best for your classroom or your district or your school. But the support is there, and I have been very fortunate to be in that role, supporting classroom teachers on integrating and implementing these practices in their everyday teaching and instruction. And so really it comes down to just having a good partnership with someone that can support you every step of the way.
Mandy, where might one find resources to begin, or how would they go about being able to start?
Okay, that's great. I'm going to send out some research. Well, Casey is going to send out some resources after this. So you will get this recording and you also get some resources as well. I hope they can be a resource for you. My information and contact information will be part of what is sent out as well. And so this is something that I'm extremely passionate about and that I have studied extensively and implemented extensively. And so I would love to be your resource. Also, if you check out some other things on Encompassing Education, that's a good place to start too for some free resources as well.
Thank you.
Ooh, I see a good question in the chat. Do we have, okay, some of the, this is an interactive question too. So some of the things that we talked about are things that you are already doing in the classroom. So do any of you want to share some of what maybe you're, so like, have you integrated technology into your classroom? Have you planned questioning into your lessons? Have you done any PBL in your schools before? Does anyone have any experience of doing some of those 12 strategies that we talked about?
Mandy, this is Diane. Hi. So I obviously am not in the classroom currently anymore, but when I was a STEM teacher, my favorite thing to really integrate was the PBL. So the project-based learning, it wasn't something that we did all the time, as you were saying earlier. It wasn't the only piece or component, but instead it was something that was embedded within the work that we were doing. And it is where I saw the largest amount of growth and interaction with my students. And it just really sparked so much because it was so driven by, student interest, and they could go as deep as their little brains could take them. And it was always really exciting. So I love the project-based learning piece of that and how you have that embedded in there as well.
Thank you for sharing, Diane. And I love that too. And the school that I was at previously was an elementary school, and the teachers, they kind of started with doing like one PBL unit a semester. So it was by no means how they taught all day, every day. But it was amazing to see how involved the students became in their learning. And not only that, like they were learning these academic content standards that we're responsible for, that they would be learning in the classroom anyway. Just one example, a second grade classroom that I was able to work with, they saw a problem on the playground that when it snowed and the playground was covered in snow, we had to have inside recess. So there was a driving question that meant a lot to them of like, how do we get outside to play for recess when it has snowed? And so this class went through the whole process of the teacher was, I had trained the teacher in project-based learning. And so she was able to take that driving question and lead the students through some really authentic learning that ultimately got them to the point where this class, they raised money and bought shovels. They shoveled the playground when it snowed. Everyone got to go outside for recess, even on snowy days. And so it was so impactful. And then the coolest thing is that they were able to pass that to the next class that came on. And it just became this thing of just part of the culture of the school and the classroom. And it just really transformed what was happening in our schools and our classrooms. So it really powerful. Does anyone else want to share any strategies that you are already doing in the classroom related to STEAM or STEM?
No more questions in the chat, Mandy.
Okay, great. So we are going to go ahead and start wrapping up for today. And as we do that, I want you to think about one key takeaway from today's learning. I know it was a lot, and I know it was kind of an overview, but you can either share with us by unmuting yourself, or you can type in the chat. What is the one key takeaway from today's session? We'll give you a couple minutes to think about that and get that typed up or shared out loud. And then we'll share them out with each other.
So Mandy, I'll jump in and just say I'm the SEL mental health person, so I'm not a teacher. But it struck me when you were talking about argumentation and connecting that to STEAM, especially because a lot of the things that we're seeing right now and we saw before, and you spoke to that, is being able to communicate with one another and disagree with one another in a productive and helpful way, and really supporting our students in doing that. So that's something that I spent a lot of time doing, but to think about it through this different lens and in partnership with the teachers, it just kind of has my wheels spinning. It's just kind of, it's a cool idea. We hear a lot of teachers talking about how do we reduce the conflict in our classroom with some of these social skills that have taken a few steps back, especially over the past few years. That can be really helpful in bringing all that together. So like I said, that's one that just really kind of has my wheels turning.
Thanks for sharing, Tiffany. And I love that connection, because we as educators, we can see how important that is, and we can see the need for it. But then the question comes is, well, how do we teach that? And how do we practice that? And if we can do that with things we're already doing in the classroom, I mean, that's amazing. And it's kind of one of those things where it's going to happen and we're going to know it's happening and we can plan for it, but our students aren't going to know that we planned for it.
In the chat, there are so many ways we can excel on the RISE evaluation while truly meeting students' needs in a deep and meaningful way.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you guys saw that connection, because whether it's the RISE evaluation model or a different model that your district has adopted, we have accountability as administrators, and we have accountability as teachers to make sure we are effective in our instruction. And so it's great that we have some different ways and some innovative ways that we can do that, that are not only effective through integrating STEAM teaching practices, but like I said before, it's really, really fun. It's fun for us and it's fun for our learners too. Thank you.
With the engineering, as a teacher, I know they were so heavily engaged in that process that they really came together as with collaboration. Again, I know you mentioned reducing some of the conflict and those social skills as well. But it also created a bond between some of the students. And that went so far. So to be able to hit two birds with one stone was really meaningful.
Yeah, I love that too, because you're right. It creates this whole classroom culture, which is huge. And it is not only just, important, but it's part of being an effective teacher, even on that RISE model. And I think when you mentioned that, Casey, it made me think of one of the very first years I started doing STEAM in my classroom. I was teaching kindergarten, and I had students of varying abilities, everything from our high achieving, high ability students to our students with IEPs and special needs. And when you would come into my classroom and we were doing an engineering challenge, you couldn't tell who was who. The labels were gone. Everyone was interacting. Everyone had a purpose in their learning. And it was probably one of the most transformational things for me as a teacher to see that happen with my students, to see students that in a typical classroom setting would never be on level playing field, working so closely together to solve a problem was like a reminder of why we do what we do every day. So yeah, definitely.
Yes. Those were all of the comments.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, and I think Bill, I think you're the one that asked this question earlier of what kind of support do teachers need to be able to do this? And so something wonderful about Encompassing Education is that we can partner with you to help you be innovative and to innovate effectively. So for me personally, I provide coaching support and custom professional development support in math and STEAM. And so that also, you might be aware or might not be aware, that also includes like integrating technology and project-based learning. All of the things we talked about today, separately or together, are things that I can help you support and help you support. And so that's kind of where my focus is and what this session focused on for that. But like I said, we have a wonderful, strong team of other consultants, and there are their beautiful faces right there, and all the wonderful things that we have to offer. So if this is something that you want to pursue with STEAM and math or technology integration or PBL, I'm your person for that. If you have other needs in your school and district, we have a person for that too. So like I said, Casey is going to be sending out the recording of this, but also any resources that come along with it to get you started. And if this is something that you want to do more, I hope that you are able to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. You can go ahead and write that down or send me an email and just like, what are next steps? And I'd be happy to chat with you and or meet with you and get that going, because I think that this is such a great way to really be an effective educator, but also really to help our learners become innovative learners as well. So I just want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this. And I really hope that we get a chance to partner together moving forward.